You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Brian Platzer.
Authors. I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website. Developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. The Feisty Heroine romance collection of short stories. Over 30 plus pulse racing shorts to capture your heart with USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and award-winning authors in the mix. Paranormal, contemporary, fantasy, and historical romance that will whet your appetite with titillating, heart-pounding tales you'll want to read again, then beg for more. Fall in love with your next book crush. Pre-order this amazing collection of shorts, over 30 pulse-pounding stories for only 99 cents.
Proceed with caution. Buying this collection may lead to addictive reading, falling in love with your next book crush, and staying up past your bedtime to see what happens next.
Get your limited edition copy of Feisty Heroines. Look for the link in the show notes of this episode. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have Joshua Hood on the show with me today. He has a brand new book that's out everywhere now when you're hearing this. It's called Robert Ludlum's The Treadstone Resurrection. If you are a fan of the old Robert Ludlum books, the Bourne Identity, the Bourne universe books and movies, this is going to be a must-have for your bookshelf. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Wow. My first memory probably of writing, I guess, would be when I was very, very little. My dad, I would say 3 or 4, my dad used to read The Hobbit to me by J.R. Tolkien before I went to bed, and I was kind of a hyperactive kid, but whenever that book came out, it was all attention. And my mom used to tell stories how I loved the word adventure, and every time that word would come up, I'd say, there's that word again. And from there, it was just kind of this, I guess, evolving love story with books. I remember I might have been 10 or 11 years old. I was visiting my grandmother, and I think this was the first time I ever tried or thought about writing. we were watching, I think Thunderball, a James Bond movie came on, back then it was like TMC, the Turner Movie Channel or something. And at the end of the movie, it was one of those things where like, I didn't want it to end. And so she had this old word processor, and I sat down and was like, well, I'm going to write my own version of that. And that is kind of where this obsession started.
That is fantastic. When you started writing, did anyone in your life, your parents or a teacher, anyone recognize this storytelling gift or gene that you were born with?
Well, I'm from the South, so we're all kind of, we like to talk, and I don't know if there's something in the water here in Memphis. My good friend Mark Graney, he lives here, and Ace Atkins used to live here. There's, man, he just blanked on his name, but quite a few writers, both fiction and nonfiction, have grown up, around the Delta, and it's just a very rich storytelling history. Growing up, both my mother and my father, were both very supportive, but my mom used to tell me the only people who make money writing are people who write ransom notes. And so the idea of, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and honestly, I've known for as long as I can remember that that's what I was meant to do, but it's kind of, I assume, like your child telling you he wants to be an astronaut. And you're like, well, that's great, you're supportive, but, or, an artist or something, like you're going to need a real job. And so, yes, they were very supportive of me. I think that, that is one of the only things I've ever really been good at, but breaking that, having the dream and then being able to live it are, two totally different things, and it's still such a blessing that I have to pinch myself every day.
Well, and because you wanted to be a writer, the obvious path to that is to join the Army, right?
Yeah, well, looking back on it now, I can see clearly, but the first thing about writing is, what do you write about? People say write what you know. After college, and I didn't know anything worth writing about, really, and that's the excuse I kind of use. And I realize now that I spent probably, up until my first book, that amount of time running from it. And I think that might be something similar to anything that you want to do and might be scared about, that you kind of find times and situations to not do that. And joining the Army, I think, was a part of that, was wanting to have something, to write about, but also, it's like, hey, I'm a grunt. I don't need to be able to write. And it worked out, though.
Yeah, well, it definitely lends a certain air of authenticity to your writing voice. That's for sure. As well as you help someone like me who hasn't served to connect with that mindset and that spirit, if you will, like only someone can, who's seen it through your eyes, can.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also a Southerner. I'm from south of where you are in Mississippi, and there is something about the Southern storytelling mindset. I don't know what it is, if it's the hot summers and sitting out on the porch or what it is, but there does seem to be this Southern storytelling thing. Do you attribute that to anything in particular?
It is kind of like you said, the mixture of the heat and like the very land and landscape, and it's just the South for me. I've lived when I was away in the Army and other places. You come back home, you come back to this area, specifically the Delta, and it just feels different. It's like when you go to Florida and you're in the Everglades, like you feel like you have to write like some story about a body being found there, you know, and it's like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but for me, it's always just felt like this, you know, it was just this fertile ground, and you grow up hearing stories about everything. You know, everybody in the South loves to talk, and they love to eat, and they love to talk and eat. And so you just grow up around all these rich stories that just they become a fabric of your life. And so I definitely think that I was blessed, you know, to live in a place like that where I don't know if it's like that elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, I heard a story about you a while back, and I think after you left the Army, you joined the local sheriff's office, and you served there until your son was born, and then that triggered something in you, and that again, this life experience made you want to write. Could you tell us about that?
Well, before my son was born, I'd written 4 books, I believe, 2 of my own, and I ghost wrote 2. And it was, you know, there was something about going from the military to being on a SWAT team, which, you know, doing what we did. And then, you know, you feel like you kind of pick up this dirt that is like on you, and not specifically like from a person or anything, but just from, you know, like the only way I can compare it is, let's say, and I don't mean to be degrading or any way, but it's like
Sure.
a trash man, you know, like a trash man, he picks up the trash. And at the end of the day, he smells like the trash, but, you know, when he takes off the clothes and takes a shower, he's not trash.
Yeah.
But, you know,
that's what he's been immersed in all day.
Right. And it stays, you know, beyond the clothes. You can wash that out, but it begins to stay, like that smell becomes a part of you. And it starts to feel like it gets into your pores, etc. And holding my son, who, you know, was at that point like basically perfect, I knew that I could not bring. I was working 60 hours a week, you know, kicking indoors, doing all this stuff that is dangerous. And I wanted to be a father. I wanted to be there for him. I only wanted to show and give him the best things. I didn't want, you know, that was a part of my life, and I didn't want him to be a part of that. So that was a decision to leave. It was just, you know, literally holding him and being like, I can't do this anymore.
Right. You said you had written 4 novels at that point, 2 of them published. Were those part of the Search and Destroy series?
Right, yeah. I wrote those 2 under my name, and then the ghost writing thing, I wrote 2 more. They were published too, but not under my name. And it was a great experience that, you know, building that foundation helped me get to this Treadstone, and to the hard work that I learned there lent itself to writing a book of this magnitude.
Right. As a fan of Robert Ludlum and of the Bourne series, I came to those books through the movies, which I'm sure a lot of people did. And I remember watching those first Bourne movies and then going and grabbing the novels and reading them. And first thing that kind of shocked me was that first book was written in 1980. So kind of all of the tech and all of the, you know, the setting of the movies was not what I was reading. You know, you got Jason Bourne running to a phone booth and, you know, hacking a phone system, you know, through the dial-up phone and all of this stuff. And it's a little shocking if you know, came from the new movies and go back. One thing that I loved about the Treadstone Resurrection is that you take the world of that we love, but we're kind of brought up to date, and it's not just a rebooting of Jason. We get the best of the world, but it's truly a modern story. How did you come to be involved with this?
Well, For the book itself, I went down to BoucherCon. I think it was maybe a year or two ago. I guess it was in Florida, and my good friend Mark Graney. I went with him, and I got to meet his editor, Tom Colgan at Penguin, who I aptly call the Kingmaker because of what he's done. And we talked about books and other things, and a couple weeks after I got back, I got this call from Tom and asked, would I be interested in trying out for a Ludlum book? And my first thought was it was going to be a Bourne, and I was kind of like, nah, that's a heavy burden to bear. And my first thought was like, well, I don't want to write a Bourne book, because it's like, in my opinion, that's our version, America's version of James Bond, and I didn't know if that fit my style. And he explained to me that what Treadstone was, etc. And so it sounded very interesting. And like you, I had actually read the books first, then I saw the movie. And upon after writing a synopsis and 3 sample chapters, getting accepted and saying, hey, you can would you like this gig? My first question was, how is a reader going to see this world? Because like you said, it was written in the 80s, and all that stuff, hacking a phone booth, everything like that was pretty high tech back then. But, and those, you read back at all those books in the 80s, they were all like that. And honestly, that was we have the ability, because of technology, to put a character in a situation and it's like impossible. And he's like, oh, I just pick up my cell phone or my GPS and I'll do X, Y, or Z and call in a drone. And, that takes away from the story, in my opinion. So I love those older books where, they were limited by hardwire tech, but there was a lot more of their intelligence, their craft, their cunning to get about. But I knew that Treadstone really couldn't be that type of book, simply because that's not what the audience is used to anymore.
Exactly. So what was the pitch? They told you that this was going to be kind of a spin-off of Bourne with the Treadstone. How did they pitch to you that you would get to live in this universe but tell your own story?
It was actually on a phone call, and it was, hey, would you like to do this? And I said, yes. And then they said, well, how would you do it? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, what would the plot be? And so literally on a 30-minute phone call, I just kind of it was like a jam session. It was like, well, I think I would, the first question I asked, originally the book was supposed to be written almost like directly, not a sequel to the movie, but directly after the movie. So Treadstone was closed in the movie, and Treadstone didn't exist. So I was like, well, I would, the first thing that came to mind is, what would someone do if they got a pink slip from Treadstone because it had been closed? One, you've been working in this very specialized field for however long, and then it doesn't exist anymore. You don't get a 401k plan or a severance pay. You can't really put anything on your resume. So as a new father, I was like, well, how would you support your family? What would happen if you had a family? And so we started talking about that, and I kind of pitched the idea of this guy who is a contemporary of Bourne, but unlike Bourne, the biggest thing, the first hurdle to overcome was Bourne is likable, especially in the books, because you have to do a much deeper dive in a book, because he was honestly, if you strip away everything, because there's no real patriotism in the book so much. He's just an assassin who works for the government and is, in my opinion, not a very good person, right? And in the movies, we see the same. First time we see him, he's put a gun to the back of some guy's head, and he has a child, and he decides not to kill him, but he we know that he has killed people before. And so how do you make somebody like that likable? And Robert Ludlum did an amazing job of making it so he can't remember what he used to do, and he's trying to get redemption. But how does the same person become likable and find the same redemption if he does remember? And that's kind of what grabbed me at the beginning and kind of pulled me down this rabbit hole.
Right. So I love playing what if scenarios with, especially with kind of a known entity, and you start, well, what if this happened and what if that happened, and the kind of the options are unlimited. But you anchored the story with a character of Adam Hayes, and like you just kind of described, you know what happens when Treadstone's not there anymore. And then what do you do? Tell me about building the character of Adam Hayes.
With Adam Hayes, everything revolved around him being likable, because I approach my characters in the craft of writing in the same way a method actor would, I believe, because I've never been able to, with modern literature, in my opinion, being character-driven, especially genre fiction, the reader imprints more with the character than the book, in my opinion. Like, look at Bosch. Like, people don't even call it like Michael Connelly's Bosch. It's just Bosch. Like, now Michael Connelly is Bosch and vice versa almost. And so,
and then the TV show, he, Titus Welliver looks a little bit like Michael Connelly. I think they're merging.
Well, exactly. And that is like the issue. The primary way I've always thought about writing is, we're, as an author, I'm making a contract with a reader, and I'm asking them to suspend disbelief, and they're plunking down X amount of dollars, which is not, books are not cheap. And so the important thing is to make sure that they imprint with the character. They imprint with the character. They need to, therefore, like him or want to be like him. And so that was, when building Adam Hayes, both for the reader, but mainly for myself so I could get into the story, was I had to understand this guy. I had to understand his motivations, but I had to like him because I don't want to write about some dude. I'm like, man, this guy's a a-hole. I don't enjoy being around him like 8 hours a day. And so that was the first thing, is that I had to build a character, his backstory, the way he thinks, etc., that I could understand, that I was interested in learning more about him. And then once those were created, I just kind of let my characters go. And so I've read articles and books in the past where plot-based, stories, you move these characters around like chess pieces. But the hard part about Adam Hayes was, once I got him built and, kind of wound up and sent him along his way, there were times when I'd be like, all right, Adam, you're going to do this. And he would just be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And staying true to the character and then allowing him to come to life, that was all part and parcel of this book. And I think I tried to do that well with him, and then let him tell me the story, if that makes any sense.
Sure. You chose to set a portion of the book, a good portion of the book, in Venezuela and around what's going on there. Venezuela is getting kind of international attention, but not as much as I think it should. There's a lot going on there, and I don't know if people just aren't paying attention or what. But what was the decision for you to put kind of the linchpin of the story in Venezuela, and what did you hope to communicate about that?
Well, as a fan of the genre and a voracious reader of both fiction and nonfiction, specifically in military or these types of thrillers, I did not want to write another book in the Mideast. And I kind of felt that the trend was kind of moving towards Russia and China, and I didn't want to do that because, Treadstone was based primarily in Europe. And so I was looking for a new locale, and I wanted it to challenge my character. I wanted it to be a Wild West, anything goes type thing, but I was looking for something, a mirror almost, for Adam Hayes, because in my mind, Adam Hayes is searching for his identity after he is, gotten out of Treadstone, in a lot of the ways that Bourne was searching for his identity. And I felt that Venezuela is now, and has been for a while, searching for its identity, its place. And I thought it was a way to show, I want a theme or a moral or something out of a book, a purpose, besides just telling a story, and being able to shed light on something, it's just during the research, like you said, we see it on the TV, but not much. But you start researching, and I was able to talk to a few people who had recently left Venezuela and come to live in the States. You don't understand how terrible it is there until you start looking at it. And it's kind of, I believe that we as people have a tendency to be like, well, it's not happening to me, so let's see what's on the next channel. And it was a kind of a heartbreaking situation, but as a people, they have such a strong and rich heritage, culture, and personal identity that it was like you can see the sunshine behind the clouds. And it was just, I think it lent itself very well for this story.
Right. Joshua, as someone who has served in the military, you obviously understand, operations and things like that. But when you're dealing with a CIA Black Ops, the very nature of Black Ops is we don't know about it. How do you prepare to write something like that and do it believably?
Well, I in the military, I was lucky enough to have had a few different jobs while I was in the military where I was able to see the bigger picture instead of just, obviously we saw the ground view and what was going on, in your 5-foot, 10-foot box. But then when you back up to the 30,000 foot level and you see that this operation in this town links to this one and then to this one and this other unit's doing this, and then the global strategy is this, I was able to see how those things kind of work together. And I assumed that a CIA operation would be the same thing. You just subtract all the people on the ground and just put one person there. And obviously, they would need money. How would they get there? How would they eat? Where would they stay? Those types of things. And I just tried to, logically as much as possible, based on what I had seen and read, answer those questions within the realm of reason, I guess.
Right. Well, the book, Robert Ludlum's The Treadstone Resurrection, is out everywhere now when you're hearing this. Joshua, this has been so much fun chatting. If people are just learning about you and want to dig into all the stuff that you do, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
Definitely. They can go to my website at joshuahoodbooks.com. They can subscribe, read the blog that I have. It's called Under the Hood. And then Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is at Joshua Hood Books.
Well, Joshua, we know the nature of publishing is, by the time this book is out, it's probably been finished and off of your desk or computer for quite a while now. What are you working on now?
I'm working on the next one right now.
I was hoping you were going to say that. That's excellent. So can we expect that around 2021, you think?
Unless they want to put it out earlier, but I would love to turn it in 2021. Have it published, I should say. No one wants to hear that. Have it published in 2021.
Love it. Well, Robert Ludlum's The Treadstone Resurrection. There's links to it in the show notes. I'm going to also link up your website, and social media, and all that stuff. Joshua, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Stay tuned now for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Fox's The Ember War.
the near future. The probe slowed as the sun's heliosphere disrupted the graviton wave it rode in on from the abyss of deep space. Awakened by the sudden deceleration, the probe absorbed the electromagnetic spectrum utilized by its target species and assessed the technological sophistication of the sole sentient species on Earth. The probe adjusted its course to take it into the system's primary. If the humans couldn't survive, with its help, what was to come, then the probe would annihilate itself. There would be no trace of it for the enemy, and no chance of humanity's existence beyond the time it had until the enemy arrived. The probe analyzed filed patents, military expenditures, birth rates, mathematical advancement, and space exploration. The first assessment fell within the margin of error of survival and extinction for humanity. The probe's programming allowed for limited, autonomous decision-making, choice being a rare luxury for the probe's class of artificial intelligence. The probe found itself in a position to choose between ending its mission in the sun's fire and a mathematically improbable defense of humanity, and the potential compromise of its much larger mission. Given the rare opportunity to make its own decision, the probe opted to dither. In the week it took to pass into Jupiter's orbit, the probe took in more data. It scoured the internet for factors to add to the assessment, but the assessment remained the same. Unlikely, but possible. By the time it shot past Mars, the probe still hadn't made a decision. As the time to adjust course for Earth or continue into the Sun approached, the probe conducted a final scan of cloud storage servers for any new information, and found something interesting. While the new information made only a negligible impact on the assessment, the probe adjusted course to Earth. It hadn't traveled all this way for nothing. In the desert south of Phoenix, Arizona, it landed with no more fanfare than a slight thump and a few startled cows. Then it broke into the local cell network and made a call. Mark Ibarra awoke to his phone ringing at max volume, playing a pop ditty that he hated with vehemence. He rolled off the mattress that lay on the floor and crawled on his hands and knees to where his cell was recharging. His roommate, who paid the majority of their rent and got to sleep on an actual bed, grumbled and let off a slew of slurred insults. Mark reached his cell and slapped at it until the offending music ended. He blinked sleep from his eyes and tried to focus on the caller's name on the screen. The only people who'd call at this ungodly hour were his family in Basque country, or maybe Jessica in his applied robotics course wanted a late-night study break. The name on the screen was Answer Me. He closed an eye and reread the name. It was way too early, or too late, depending on one's point of view, for this nonsense. He turned the ringer off and went back to bed. Sleep was about to claim him when the phone rang again, just as loudly as last time, but now with a disco anthem. "Seriously?" his roommate slurred. Mark declined the call and powered the phone off. He flopped back on his bed and curled into his blanket. To hell with my first class, he thought. Arizona State University had a lax attendance policy, one which he'd abused for nights like this. The cell erupted with big band music. Mark took his head out from beneath the covers and looked at his phone like it was a thing possessed. The phone vibrated so hard that it practically danced a jig on the floor, and the screen flashed Answer Me over and over again as music blared. "Dude," said his roommate, now sitting up in his bed. Mark swiped the phone off the charging cord, and the music stopped. The caller's name undulated with a rainbow of colors, and an arrow appeared on the screen, pointing to the button he had to press to answer the call. When did I get this app? he thought. Mark sighed and left the bedroom, meandering into the hallway bathroom with the grace of a zombie. The battered mattress he slept on played hell with his back and left him stiff every morning. Dropping his boxers, he took a seat on the toilet and answered the call, determined to return this caller's civility with some interesting background noise. "What?" he murmured. "Mark Ibarra. I need to see you." The voice was mechanical, asexual in its monotone. "Do you have any friggin' idea what time it is? Wait, who the hell is this?" "You must come to me immediately. We must discuss the mathematical proof you have stored in document title This Can't Be Right, Doc. Mark shot to his feet. The boxers around his ankles tripped him up, and he stumbled out of the bathroom and fell against the wall. His elbow punched a hole in the drywall, and the cell clattered to the floor. He scooped the phone back up and struggled to breathe as a sudden asthma attack came over him. How? He couldn't finish his question until he found his inhaler in the kitchen, mere steps away in the tiny apartment. He took a deep breath from the inhaler and felt the tightness leave his lungs. That someone knew of his proof was impossible. He'd finished it earlier that night and had encrypted it several times before loading it into a cloud file that shouldn't have been linked to him in any way. "How do you know about that?" he asked. "You must come to me immediately. There is little time. Look at your screen," the robotic voice said. His screen changed to a map program, displaying a pin in an open field just off the highway, connecting Phoenix to the suburb of Maricopa. "Come. Now." Mark grabbed his keys. An hour later, his jeans ripped from scaling a barbed wire fence, Mark was surrounded by desert scrub. The blue of the morning rose behind him, where his beat-up Honda waited on the side of the highway. With his cell to its...
Some things you write now, do they differ in the writing process from
plants? Looked a lot like benign mesquite trees in the darkness. A Native American casino in the distance served as his North Star, helping him keep his bearings. "You're not out here, are you? I'm being punked, aren't I?" he asked the mysterious caller. "You are 9.26 meters to my east-southeast. Punk, decayed wood, used as tinder. Are you on fire?" the caller said. Mark rolled his eyes. This wasn't the first time the caller had used the non-standard meanings of words during what passed as conversation between the two. Mark had tried to get the caller to explain how he knew about his theorem and why they had to meet in the middle of the desert. The caller had refused to say anything. He would only reiterate that Mark had to come quickly to see him, chiding him every time Mark deviated from the provided driving directions. "If you're so close, why can't I see you?" he asked. He took a few steps in what he thought was a northwesterly direction and squished into a cow patty.